I was halfway through staining the new planks on my dock when I heard the sound of heels clicking on gravel. That dreaded sound. I looked up, and there she was, Barbara Fairchild, head of the Willow Creek HOA and self-appointed queen of the lakefront. She had her signature clipboard clutched in one hand and a scowl that could sour milk. The kind of woman who power walked through the neighborhood just to spot violations. I swear she sniffed out happiness just to squash it. "Arthur Sandell," she said, like my name personally offended her. "You built this dock without HOA approval. That's a violation of Section 8, Article 12. I stood up, wiping my hands on a rag. "It's a replacement dock. The old one collapsed last winter. I had the state permit approved 2 months ago." Her eyes narrowed. "This is private association property. You can't just build whatever you want because the state says so. The HOA has final say on all structures." "No, Barbara. The shoreline is under state jurisdiction, always has been." "The HOA doesn't own the water." She scribbled something furiously on her clipboard. "We'll see what the board says. Expect a fine in the mail." I laughed, which made her face twist even more. "I hope the board likes paperwork because I've got the permit with my name on it, signed and sealed by the Department of Natural Resources." She snapped. "Don't get cute with me, Arthur. Just because you work in town doesn't mean the rules don't apply to you." I didn't bother responding. I walked back to my toolbox and grabbed the permit, laminated and ready. I knew Barbara would pull something like this. She'd been on my case ever since I refused to let her daughter's wedding party use my backyard last summer. Ever since then, she'd been nitpicking every blade of grass on my property. She snatched the permit from my hand and scanned it, her lips moving silently. The color drained from her face when she saw the official seal and my name typed neatly at the top. "This doesn't matter," she snapped. "You still didn't get HOA approval." "You're wrong," I said, pointing to the clause in the HOA bylaws that clearly stated state-regulated structures didn't need board approval. "Read it carefully. Page 9. She didn't. She stomped off, muttering something about compliance violations and special meeting. I knew then it wasn't over. Not with Barbara. She hated being proven wrong more than she hated untrimmed hedges. But I had cameras and a paper trail. If she wanted a fight, she was about to get one. 3 days after Barbara's gravel-stomping exit, I found a letter duct-taped to my front door, not mailed. Not placed gently in the mailbox. Duct-taped. It was from the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, typed in all caps like a ransom note. "Cease and desist immediately. Dock construction in violation of community standards. Fines to accrue daily until removal." It was signed by the board president, not Barbara, a man named Leonard Connors. I'd met him once at a neighborhood bonfire. He'd spent most of the evening arguing about sprinkler schedules and making passive-aggressive jabs at anyone who dared use LED bulbs. I took the letter inside and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I wasn't just going to roll over. I'd spent 3 weekends and over $5,000 rebuilding that dock. Every board was pressure-treated, every nail driven with care. I had the official permit, the inspection sticker, and the email correspondence with the state engineer who had signed off on my plans. But I needed more than that. I pulled up the Willow Creek HOA charter and started reading the fine print. 38 pages of dense language, half of it sounding like it had been ripped from a Cold War treaty. But buried in Article 19 was a gold nugget. Any HOA action involving private property disputes must be accompanied by an independent third-party inspection and determination of jurisdiction. They had skipped that step. No inspection. No third-party anything. Just a letter taped like a demand note. The next morning, I drove into the county clerk's office. I requested the original plat maps for Willow Creek. The clerk behind the counter raised an eyebrow. "Planning a lawsuit?" he asked, half joking. "Not yet," I said, "but I like to be prepared." An hour later, the county's jurisdiction map confirmed what I suspected. The HOA boundary ended 5 feet before the beginning of the shoreline. My dock sat squarely on state-regulated land. Armed with the map, I returned home and emailed copies to Leonard and the HOA board's general inbox. I included the permit, the clause from their own charter, and a polite but unmistakably firm request that they retract the violation or face a formal complaint with the County Housing Oversight Commission. 2 hours later, I got a reply. Not from Leonard. From someone named Rachel Kim, the HOA's legal advisor. Mr. Sandell, the email began, we are currently reviewing the documents you provided. In the meantime, we respectfully request that no further construction occur until this matter is resolved. I chuckled. Construction was long done. They were chasing ghosts. That evening, I noticed Barbara pacing near my driveway, talking on her phone with wild hand gestures. I stayed inside, watching through the blinds. She was clearly upset, her voice carrying across the lawn. No, he's bluffing. I don't care what the map says, he can't just build it without our say. I recorded the whole thing from my window camera. I'd installed it after a neighbor caught someone taking pictures of his backyard from the sidewalk. Barbara had a reputation. The next morning, things escalated. I woke to find orange spray paint on my dock, a giant X across the planks, and the word illegal scrawled in blocky letters. That was it. I called the sheriff. Deputy Coleman arrived 20 minutes later. He was a tall, quiet guy with a mustache that looked like it hadn't moved in a decade. I showed him the footage from the night before, the letter and the spray paint. He nodded slowly. Mind if I take this with me? Please do, I said, and let me know if you need anything else. I've got a USB full of HOA emails and every document I've sent them. 3 hours later, I got a call from Deputy Coleman. Arthur, he said, we pulled some footage from the neighbor's security cam across the lake. Shows Barbara walking down to your dock with a can in her hand around 1:30 last night. Did you confront her? We did. She denied it, said she was out for a walk. Does she usually walk with a can of paint? I asked. Not unless it's for creative cardio, he said flatly. We're filing a report. You'll get a copy. By noon, word had spread. My neighbor Terrence, a retired firefighter with a love for coffee and gossip, leaned over the fence. Hey, you hear the HOA's calling an emergency meeting? I did now, I said. Barbara's in damage control mode. Apparently she told the board you threatened her. I raised an eyebrow. Threatened her how? She didn't say, just that she felt emotionally endangered by your dock. I nearly dropped my coffee. That night, the HOA meeting was held in the community center, a beige box with flickering lights and a fridge full of expired soda. I hadn't planned to attend, but word got around fast and more than 30 homeowners showed up. People I hadn't seen in months. Even the Johnsons came, and they usually avoided neighborhood events like the plague. Barbara stood at the front, arms crossed, face tense. Leonard cleared his throat. We're here to address a situation involving a resident's non-compliant construction and the alleged vandalism of association property. I stood up. It's not association property. I have the jurisdiction map here, I said, holding up a copy. And the vandalism was done to my dock. Not by me, but by someone who's now under investigation by the sheriff's department. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Barbara's voice cracked. You're twisting facts, Arthur. That dock is fully permitted through the state. You saw the documents. Everyone on this board saw them. And for the record, the HOA doesn't have any say over structures on state-regulated shoreline. That's not my opinion, that's law. Leonard looked uncomfortable. We're still reviewing what? I submitted every piece of documentation, and now my property's been vandalized. The person responsible was caught on camera. Sheriff's department is handling it. More murmurs, louder this time. A woman in the back raised her hand. If the HOA went after him knowing they didn't have jurisdiction and someone vandalized his property, aren't they liable? That shut the room up. I let the silence hang. Then I added, I've already contacted a housing attorney. If this harassment continues, I'll be filing a civil claim. And I'll name everyone on the board who supported these actions. Barbara's face turned a shade of red I hadn't seen before. Somewhere between cranberry and fire truck. Leonard looked down at his notes. Let's take a 5-minute recess. They huddled behind the folding table. Barbara was whispering furiously, but the rest of the board didn't look convinced. Rachel Kim, the legal advisor, was whispering something to Leonard. He nodded slowly. When they returned, Leonard cleared his throat again. After reviewing the jurisdictional documents and consulting with counsel, we are formally retracting the violation notice against Mr. Sandell. The HOA will not pursue further action on this matter. Gasps. Then, from the back, someone clapped. A few others joined. Within seconds, the room erupted into applause. Barbara stormed out. I stood still, watching her go. For the first time in months, the weight of her constant meddling lifted. People came up to thank me one by one. Some asked for copies of the maps. Others wanted help pushing back on their own absurd citations. I gave them everything. The next morning, I found a note slid under my door. No envelope, just a folded piece of paper. In the end, you'll regret making enemies. No signature, but I knew the handwriting. The following week, things in Willow Creek got quiet, but not in a good way. More like the eerie silence before a summer storm blows over the lake and rips the trees sideways. No letters, no emails, no surprise visits. Barbara Fairchild had vanished from public view completely. Not a single walk-by, no clipboard sightings, nothing. Some said she'd taken a restorative retreat in the mountains. Others whispered she was at her lawyer's office every other day, but I knew better. She wasn't hiding. She was planning. One morning, I stepped out to retrieve the local paper and found a man standing on the edge of my driveway. Mid-30s, khakis, rolled-up sleeves, and aviator sunglasses that looked more federal agent than HOA business. He introduced himself as Detective Miles Conrad from the County Property Crimes Division. Mind if I ask you a few questions about your HOA? He said. I motioned him toward the porch. Sure. You hear about the vandalism, actually, he said, flipping open a slim notebook. I'm investigating a different incident. You familiar with the Willow Creek HOA Reserve Fund? I leaned against the railing. I know they charge us more than any HOA in the county, and nobody's seen a breakdown of where it goes. That fund? He nodded. We received a tip last week. Anonymous. Claimed that large portions of the HOA's reserve budget were being diverted to an unregistered consulting firm. The same one that just so happens to list Barbara Fairchild as its sole officer. I blinked. You're saying she was paying herself out of the HOA's emergency fund, not directly. The payments were disguised as land use compliance reviews and community infrastructure assessments. But the kicker: that consulting firm doesn't exist in any state business registry. And none of the projects it supposedly oversaw, new lighting, sidewalk repairs, drainage upgrades, were ever approved by the city. I crossed my arms. So she was stealing. He flipped a page. Looks that way. We're still auditing the accounts, but it's easily over $60,000. I whistled. Can I help? He hesitated. Actually, yes. We found something odd on a recent transaction. One of the invoices tied to your dock. I straightened. My dock. According to HOA records, they issued a payment to this consulting firm for a shoreline remediation plan associated with your address. $12,000. That's not linked to any permit you filed, and the county has no record of such a plan being submitted. That's because there isn't one. I never requested anything like that. He scribbled something in his notebook. Thought so. If you have any documentation showing the only permit came from the state and had nothing to do with the HOA, that'd help. Give me 5 minutes, I said. I returned with a folder I'd kept handy since this whole mess began. Inside was the laminated permit, my correspondence with the Department of Natural Resources, and a printed email thread with the state engineer confirming the permit was issued solely to me and required no HOA involvement. He flipped through it, nodding. This is solid. We'll subpoena the HOA's internal emails next. 2 days later, subpoenas were served. The fallout was immediate. Half the board resigned before the week was out. Leonard Connors, the board president who had signed off on the fake violation notice, was reportedly seen shredding documents in his garage before being stopped by county investigators. They seized his laptop and 2 external hard drives. Rachel Kim, the HOA's legal advisor, turned out to be a licensed attorney but not practicing in our state. Her license had been suspended for ethical violations 5 years ago. She'd never disclosed that to the board. The neighborhood was buzzing. People who had never spoken to me before were suddenly waving, stopping by, bringing over pie like we were in a Norman Rockwell painting. I declined most of it. I wasn't interested in popularity. I just wanted to make sure no one else got dragged through what I had. Then, something unexpected happened. Detective Conrad called again. "We found a second set of books," he said, "locked in a password-protected folder on one of the seized laptops." I waited. "It lists off the record payments to board members in exchange for supporting certain agenda items. Landscaping contracts, architectural approvals, even a few selective citations that were used to pressure residents into selling." My stomach dropped. "Selling what?" He paused. "Their homes. Below market, then resold privately through a company tied to Barbara's cousin. We've got at least 3 confirmed cases." It all clicked. That's why she'd come after me so hard, not just the dock, not just her daughter's wedding. My place sat on the widest stretch of lakefront in Willow Creek. If she could force me into noncompliance, claim the dock made my property value fall, maybe even slap a lien on it, she could pressure me into a sale. Then flip it for profit, and she would have gotten away with it. A week later, Barbara was arrested, not with sirens, not with a chase. Just a quiet knock on her door by 2 plainclothes officers and a warrant for wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud homeowners, and destruction of private property. The last one came courtesy of the spray paint and my security footage. The neighborhood held its breath. At the emergency town hall meeting, the new interim board was sworn in mostly volunteers who had been quietly ignored by the old regime. One of them, a retired municipal clerk named Joanne, took the podium with a transparency binder thicker than a phone book. "We will be conducting a full audit," she said. "Publicly, monthly reports, open meetings. No more decisions made in private backyards and wine tastings." People applauded, not politely, loud, relieved, almost giddy clapping like they'd been waiting years for someone to say it out loud. I stayed near the back, arms folded. Afterward, Joanne approached me. "You're the one who started this, aren't you?" I shook my head. "Barbara did, I just finished it," she grinned. "We could use someone like you on the new board," I laughed. I'd rather rebuild the dock again with my bare hands. Over the next few weeks, the neighborhood changed in ways I hadn't expected. People opened up. Neighbors who had been practically ghosts started chatting on their porches. Kids rode bikes freely again without being told their helmets were the wrong shade of blue. Someone put up a community garden starts here sign on the old, unused lot near the mailboxes. The HOA's new leadership released their first report. Turns out, over $200,000 had been misappropriated over a 10-year span. Most of it traced back to shell companies connected to Barbara and her inner circle. The state attorney's office filed additional charges. If convicted, she was looking at serious prison time. I stood on my dock one evening as the sun dipped below the tree line, casting orange light across the still water. The spray paint had long since been sanded off and replaced with a fresh seal. A neighbor's canoe drifted past, their dog barking happily at ducks. I didn't feel victorious. I felt grounded, because justice, when it finally shows up, doesn't come with fireworks or speeches. It comes with silence. Peace. The kind of quiet that means nobody's watching your grass length, nobody's photographing your mailbox, and nobody's trying to steal your home with a pen and a gavel. And that, I decided, was better than any victory lap. I was repairing the latch on the garden shed when the county prosecutor showed up on my doorstep. He wore a navy sport coat despite the heat and carried a folder thicker than the HOA's old rulebook. His name was Evan Morales, and he didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I need you to testify," he said, stepping just far enough inside to glance around before accepting a seat at the kitchen table. "You're the only resident who documented everything from the beginning. Your records are airtight. And more importantly, you were directly targeted." I poured him a glass of water without asking. "Will this go to trial?" He nodded. "Grand jury already returned indictments: fraud, conspiracy, criminal misappropriation, and this is important attempted civil forfeiture under false pretenses. That last one came from the scheme to pressure residents into selling by manufacturing violations." I leaned back in the chair. "You have the financial trail. Every electronic transfer, every invoice, every signature. We even recovered deleted emails from Leonard Connor's laptop." Turns out, Barbara wasn't just running the show, she was drafting up fake consultations, billing the HOA, and funneling the money into a brokerage account under her sister's name. I blinked. So the board knew. Some did. Some didn't, but they all signed off without asking questions. "That's negligence at best, collusion at worst. We're charging 5 total." I opened the drawer where I kept the external hard drive. "Every camera file I've saved is on here, including the night she vandalized the dock and the HOA meeting where everything unraveled." Morales took it like it was made of glass. "You'll probably get subpoenaed for the pre-trial hearing. I'll prep you. And Arthur, this isn't just about your dock anymore. It's about the whole system they weaponized." By the time he left, the sun had dipped behind the sycamores, turning the lake a dull bronze. The neighborhood was quieter now. No HOA patrols, no random inspections, no letters demanding compliance over non-existent rules. But the damage they'd caused was still being uncovered. I ran into Terrence a few days later while walking to the post box. He was holding a scratched-up manila folder and looked like he hadn't slept. "Just got a call," he said without preamble. "Turns out the HOA fined me for a non-existent fence variance 2 years ago. I paid without questioning it. Now the county says that money never made it into the HOA's official account." "Where'd it go?" He handed me the folder. Inside were 2 receipts, one handwritten, one typed, and both bore a signature that didn't match anyone on the new board. "Looks like Barbara created a shadow ledger," he muttered. "I checked with Joanne. They're missing over 30 payment records. And at least 3 homes were flipped quietly to out-of-town buyers who have never even stepped foot here." The pieces were still falling into place. 2 weeks later, the trial began. I sat in the witness box under oath, answering each question with precise, documented responses. Morales guided the testimony without leading. The defense attorney tried to discredit my claims by implying I had a personal grudge. "Isn't it true," he asked, pacing slowly, "that you refused to participate in association-sponsored events and often ignored HOA correspondence?" I looked him dead in the eye. "I ignored harassment disguised as policy enforcement. I followed every legal requirement for my property." "The HOA didn't." He tried to shift the narrative, pointing out that I had installed surveillance on my property. "Isn't that excessive for a peaceful neighborhood?" I kept my voice even. "If I hadn't, we wouldn't have evidence of criminal vandalism or audio of board members admitting they had no jurisdiction, or footage of Miss Fairchild trespassing after midnight," the courtroom murmured. The judge called for silence. The prosecution rolled out the electronic audit next. Dozens of transactions, all marked consulting. No actual deliverables. No invoices beyond the ones Barbara had created herself. They traced the funds to a brokerage in Delaware, then to a property in Naples, Florida, where Barbara's sister had recently purchased a condo in cash. The tipping point came when Morales played an audio clip. It was Barbara's voice recorded during a closed-door meeting. "If we flag his dock, we can claim non-compliance. That's enough to start the lien process. He'll fold." Her tone was clinical, calculated. "And if he doesn't?" someone else asked. "Then we keep piling it on. Eventually, he'll either sell or crack." The courtroom was dead silent. Barbara sat motionless, flanked by her attorney. Her hair was pulled back tightly, the confident posture from her HOA days gone completely. She didn't look like a leader anymore. She looked like a cornered executive who'd finally run out of excuses. The jury returned a verdict in less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Barbara received a sentence of 8 years in state prison, with restitution ordered to the affected homeowners. Leonard got 5, and the others received suspended sentences with mandatory community service and a lifetime ban from any future HOA positions. The court appointed a financial trustee to oversee the Willow Creek HOA until a full election could be held. Joanne stayed on as interim president and immediately posted every HOA financial report online in a publicly accessible folder. We held a neighborhood gathering after the verdict, not a celebration, more like a release. People brought folding chairs and coolers. Someone grilled ribs on a portable smoker. For the first time in years, no one was looking over their shoulder, waiting for a citation or a cold knock on the door. Joanne clinked a glass to get everyone's attention. We're holding board elections next month. No more closed meetings, no more mystery fines. And if anyone tries to turn this place into their personal empire again, you come find me. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Terrence raised a paper plate. To Arthur, the guy who kept receipts literally. I shook my head. To everyone who stood up, it took all of us. Later that night, I walked back to the dock. The wood felt solid under my feet, the water calm, the moonlight cutting a silver path across the lake. A boat drifted in the distance, someone fishing, probably. Peaceful. I thought about everything that had happened and how close we'd come to losing not just money but trust. Trust in each other. Trust in fairness. Trust that when you follow the law it means something. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Morales. Civil restitution request approved. You'll be reimbursed for damages to the dock and legal expenses. I turned the screen off and slipped the phone away. The only thing I wanted now was quiet. Not the silence of fear, but the kind that comes when justice has finally done its work. And for the first time in a long while, it was quiet in Willow Creek.